Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop on scientific storytelling, translating research for broad audiences. My name is Min Kyung Lee, and I serve as the Acting Chief Engagement Officer for the All of Us Research Program. It's always been very important to the program that research discoveries from our data set are communicated in clear and accessible language so that everyone can understand the benefits of this program and research overall. We also understand that it's an important form of returning value to our participants and their communities, and that their participation is essential in making these discoveries possible. That's also part of the reason why we share these research highlights, which explain research using all of us data in a clear way for all participants and audiences to understand. We also hold participant forum events developed to provide program updates on relevant research topics with our participants. And as you can see on this slide, you're invited to join today's forum starting at 4:30 Eastern Time. So some housekeeping notes before we begin this workshop. As a reminder, Science Day is a public event. To protect your privacy, you can change your display name before entering a session. Closed captions are available throughout the day, and to turn these on, you can click the CC icon in the top right of your screen and choose your preferred language. If you run into any technical issues or need an accommodation, please email allofuscienceday@pyxispartners.co. To ask a question, you can select the Q&A option at the top right of your screen, type your question and submit it. Please note that the chat box will not be monitored for questions, so please make sure to use the Q&A box. However, feel free to use the chat box to share any comments, feedback, and reactions. So for this workshop, 3 of our partners will share how researchers can share complex research topics in a way that's easier for all audiences to understand. And joining us today are Dr. Cheryl Clark and her team from Brigham and Women's Hospital, Mr. Edgar Gil-Rico with the National Alliance for Hispanic Health, and Mr. Daniel Moretti with Stanford University School of Medicine. Dr. Cheryl Clark was the principal investigator for engagement for the New England hub of the All of Us Research Program and has been a member of the program since its inception. Dr. Clark has collaborated with Ms. Marlika Marceau and Mr. Colin Settle to develop the All of Us resources and a toolkit for using plain language summaries in scientific communication to provide value back to all of us participants. Daniel Moretti is the Program Management Director at Stanford University. He works with advisory committees and community organizations to ensure that community input informs all stages of the research process. He also leads research dissemination efforts to return findings back to communities in engaging ways that provide value. Edgar Gil-Rico is the Director for Innovation and Program Development at the National Alliance for Hispanic Health. He serves as the co-principal investigator of Todos Juntos All of Us Research Program, an outreach initiative to educate, motivate, and facilitate enrollment in the program. He also manages initiatives that foster the sustainability of community-based organizations. So today, each presenter will share examples of communications materials and engagement strategies that they've used to make complex scientific topics more understandable and meaningful to the communities that they serve. At the end, we'll hold time to take Q&A all together. So please feel free to add any questions you might have in the Q&A box, and we'll cover them again at the end of all the presentations. So first, I welcome Dr. Clark and her team members, Marlika Marceau and Colin Settle, to present a communications toolkit that they've developed together. Welcome, Dr. Clark and team.
Thank you so much, Minky, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to the group, and just want to welcome everybody to the space. As we're having this conversation around communicating in plain language, we wanted to share some principles and some strategies, and we'll make a couple of key points: why we should be focusing on plain language summaries, some principles for doing this, as well as formats and channels and examples from all of us. And I suspect that I'm speaking, preaching to the choir when we talk about why scientists should create plain language summaries of our research. And primarily, we want to make sure that we return value and build trust by communicating our science in ways that folks can understand. Particularly in the All of Us Research Program, our participants join for so many reasons. Altruism, we want to give back. We love learning. We want to have personalized results and information, or we want to advocate for our communities. And so it's important to make sure that we provide summaries in ways that people can understand. And I want to share a few principles for doing that. Primarily, the first set of principles really relate to what we want our audience to know about our science. And to connect with our audiences, we certainly want to have an audience-centered focus where we think about the needs of our audience and ask ourselves the question, what does our audience already know about this topic? And then we try to fill in the gaps with our summary. We then use communication techniques to help our audiences understand the findings, asking ourselves the question, what will my audience have in terms of questions about this topic? And we want to use a narrative focus where we use storytelling. So not just providing sort of facts that are isolated, but having a beginning, a middle, and an end to our story to make our science meaningful to the audience. In addition to understanding what our audience knows and what we want them to know, we also want to have a sense of what we want our audience to feel, and really being intentional about engaging our audiences by noticing the emotional connections that our science summaries bring. So does our summary evoke curiosity, excitement, or lower emotions like guilt, shame, and fear? We also lean into professionalism and quality to brand and use inclusive language so that our audience feels respected and that our work is trustworthy. And then finally, in terms of the way we disseminate and achieve impact with our work, we also want to have this be iterative so that we collect feedback from our audience, quantitative metrics like who's reading or clicking or liking our work, and qualitative metrics, including reading the comments. These principles are important even if we're using AI to produce our summaries, we can incorporate these strategies. And so now that we've had a broad overview of the principles, I'd like to turn it over to Marlika Marceau to talk about the formats and channels through which we reach our audiences.
Thank you, Cheryl. After implementing these principles, we also want to think about how formats and channels, or the how and where our plain language summaries will reach our audience. When building plain language summaries, we are operating with the knowledge that people don't interact with information the same way. So when we use only one format, we could exclude people, especially those who process information differently. Some people may prefer to read short summaries. Others may understand through visual, audio, or video formats. Some people may need assistive technologies like closed captions or translations. Luckily, we have many channels that we can use to respond to those preferences, such as videos, which ease comprehension and retention, podcasts for in-depth storytelling, and inexpensive infographics that are clear and easy to understand. Each of these channels have their limitations, like video, which can be excessive, infographics can omit nuances, and podcasts can be time-consuming to make. So each of these channels is asking us to be thoughtful about how we want to format the material so that it's accessible to a wide audience. Channels will help us understand where to reach our audience. When we think about what channels to use, we will also want to consider what our targeted audience looks like. Younger participants are more likely to access information through social media. And social media also helps us quickly reach a large audience. Other participants may visit our website to learn more about the program and what we've found so far. Some participants may prefer physical newsletters, and those who have questions may visit a public forum for real-time feedback. So the gist is, when our research results are easy to find, navigate, and understand, it shows that we respect our audience and that we want to build trust. I will now pass it on to Colin.
And I wonder if we did. Yeah, I wonder if we did lose Colin. And so what we will do, we'll make sure that we get a chance to hear from Colin during the question and answer. But part of what we wanted to share is that in All of Us New England, we have several strategies that we have used to provide summaries. One of the examples that we're really excited about is the podcast that we have that reaches an audience that's online. We've distributed it through our newsletter, and it's an opportunity to get both conversational information out from subject matter experts in real time. And that also allows us to get some feedback through comments. And then finally, we certainly have been able to take advantage of written form newsletters where we're able to put together summaries and use QR codes to invite the participants to let us know what else they'd like to learn about. And we've been really excited to partner with the All of Us Research Program on a virtual participant convening in real time, where we've been able to answer questions and answers in that way. So those are our principles and some of the examples in New England, and very excited to have you review our toolkit. We'll make sure that gets disseminated, and looking forward to answering any questions. So I'll turn it back to Miki.
Thank you, Dr. Clark and Marlika and Colin. We'll make sure we have Colin on video for the Q&A. Next, we have Danielle Moretti, who will share best practices for creating community-friendly summaries of research. Welcome, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Miki, and thanks to everyone for having me here. So my name is Danielle Moretti, and I use all pronouns with positive intent, and I am Program Management Director at Stanford University School of Medicine, and I'm going to be talking a bit about community-engaged strategies for research dissemination. So the agenda today, I'm going to be talking about what are other research products that you can create beyond the manuscript. So we all know that manuscripts are incredibly important, but they're not the be-all end-all. So we'll also discuss community-friendly summaries, infographics, and convenings. So I'm going to start off with community-friendly summaries. And this is very similar to what our friends who just presented discussed with plain language summaries. And there's many approaches to do this. So just consider what I'm presenting now to be another resource in your resource box, in addition to the amazing toolkit that was previously shared. So there's 6 core elements that we typically highlight in our community-friendly summaries. So the first is creating a community title. So consider translating your official publication title, instead using more community-friendly language and something that's less scientific. The second is looking at what did we do? So this is a summary of your research. For example, who were the participants? How many? How did you conduct the study? And why did you conduct the study? The third is talking a bit about what was new or notable. So this highlights how your research is different from other research that's been conducted. And a prompt that I find helpful in writing this section is consider completing this sentence. This was one of the first studies to ... and fill in the blank. The fourth is speaking to what did we learn? So that's essentially summarizing the main results of your study. The fifth is what does this mean for our communities? So here you can address how the studies and findings can help the populations that participate and made this study possible. And the final 6th section is what's next? So here you can either talk about how the findings can or will be used, and you can also include what are future topics of research in this area that you hope to explore or that you hope the field explores. So I'm going to share 4 tips that I've found helpful when it comes to writing community-friendly summaries. So the first is aiming for a reading level that's somewhere between 8 to 12. And of course, the lower, the better. And I found it helpful. I typically work in Microsoft Word. So Word has its own built-in reading calculator that you could use. But there's also, if you're not using Word, there's also a lot of other free online tools to calculate what your reading level is. The second tip is avoid long sentences. That often puts on quite a lot for someone to process and makes it not as accessible. So instead, if you have long sentences, break them up into shorter, multiple sentences, or if there's a lot they're trying to convey, think about if you might be able to utilize a bulleted or numbered list. The third, and this one's difficult, is avoiding academic and research jargon. So this is looking at what are the words that might not be commonly used or known. So helpful tools that I found when it comes to thinking about other words is, of course, there's things like an online thesaurus, and then tools like AI and making sure that you're critically using AI whenever you're helping to create these summaries. And also, I found it helpful to review what are other researchers, how they're summarizing their findings in community-friendly language. I'm going to drop a link in the chat as well. Another study that we're running, and this is separate from All of Us research program, but we've created about 90 community-friendly summaries of research, and there's many, many other resources out in the field, and I found that as helpful. And also, think about your own personal network. So you can test drafts with your friends or family who are not researchers. And that can also be a fun activity for them to better understand the great research that you're doing. And then the last tip is if a health condition or a concept is not widely known, but it's necessary to include on your research, make sure that you define it the first time you use it in the summary. And think about how you might use examples to help explain what the concept is. And similarly, if you need to use acronyms or if that helps for readability, make sure you spell it out the first time that you use it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in the chat. This is and feel free if you have a phone, you can zap the QR code. We have a template that you can consider as a tool for writing community-friendly summaries, and plugged in also a couple of examples as well. So I'm going to move on to the second component, which is infographics. So you can see here on the left an example of an infographic that was created for a publication about what All of Us data tells us about frailty among LGBTQ older adults. And this is an example where kind of what I was mentioning with the tips, frailty should not be a term that we assume everyone is familiar with. So the researchers at the beginning identified frailty is a health condition related to a person's ability to manage and recover from illness, injury, or disease. So that was really essential to their work. So it's great that they included it in the summary. So some tips: use representative and inclusive imagery. You could use color highlighting or bold or larger font to emphasize key points that you want to make sure stand out. And similar to avoiding long sentences, avoid large blocks of text. So you could utilize bullet points, call out boxes, or other design techniques that help break up the text. So in the example here, you can see there is a lot of text, but there's different boxes that help to kind of put together individual ideas that help to maybe process the ideas and process the summary overall. And then also, when you think about where you can distribute the infographics, because images provide more options, or different options rather than written, think about social media. And when we say social media, think about all the platforms. We've actually seen quite a bit of interest in LinkedIn and Blue Sky, which I know maybe aren't some of the more standard platforms. You can also send them out through emails, whether that be standalone emails or newsletters if you're at an institution, or maybe reach out to an organization that has a newsletter and they might want to include it. And you can also consider websites. And then in closing, want to just emphasize that there's also opportunities to meet the community where they're at to present findings. So we've presented findings at community events. We've gone to organizations' community advisory board meetings and presented findings, and also to town halls. And you can also consider maybe you want to do a webinar to share back your research findings and provide the opportunity for attendees to ask questions. If you have a portfolio of research, you might also consider a quote unquote wrapped style of like kind of what the past years of research was done. But notice I said wrapped in question marks. We don't want any streaming services to send out cease and desist letters. So think about, what are different ways that you might distribute and share out the findings. Thanks so much for having me. I'll go ahead and pass it on back to Minky.
Thanks, Daniel. Now we welcome our final presenter, Mr. Edgar Gilrico, to discuss how he implemented a grant requirement that researchers deliver a community-facing product. Welcome, Edgar.
Thank you so much, Minky, and thank you for everybody who is today joining us in Science Day. It's fantastic to be here. After what Dr. Clark, team, and Daniel just presented in the process to develop these materials, I'm going to narrow it down and focus more in what we have learned from having researchers use the channel of presenting in the communities. This initiative is called Researchers in the Community under the Healthy Americas Research Consortium. And for us at the Alliance, since we have been one of the engagement partners, trying to get volunteers to join the All of Us program, we hear very early from the start how important it was for the communities to receive some value. To a lot of the comments that they always say is like, we participate in research, researchers come, they get our data, and we never hear back from them. So part of what we did was we started by offering grants to researchers. We have all of this data, now we want researchers to look into our data and tell our communities what's going on. So since 2022, we have awarded more than 67 grants from the Healthy Americas Foundation and the Alliance to different types of researchers. And what we found is that because the promise of All of Us was to create this fantastic database that was very diverse, that many different researchers can be exploring the research interest, there is not one topic in specific that they have been doing and researching, but several topics helping the community. Of course, they all wanted to do peer-reviewed journal presentations, scientific conferences, but part of receiving the award from the Alliance, and it was something that was different, was that they needed to develop a community product and going to communities if possible to present the research. So who are these researchers who have been out in the communities? So of the 67 grants that we have provided, number one rule was you are not working alone. Good science need collaboration, good science need different perspectives. So a total of 203 researchers conform these 67 teams. Our goal was 50% or more to be early training researchers. So we have undergraduate students, we have graduate students, trainees, and very early professionals who are getting into the research field. So 61% of those represent the group that we have been funding. Most of them have done peer-reviewed publications. 11 teams have publications in scientific magazines. And then we have been doing 17 presentations at the community level. And that's the focus that I want to highlight here, because through those 17 presentations, we have reached more than 600 participants, all of us participants and potential participants, because the invitations at the community level go open for all of them. So Dr. Clark and Daniel presented already the strategies in how to do it. We provide guidelines based on what the All of Us scientific communications team developed. They started developing some infographics, the researcher highlights for the participants in the All of Us program. If you're a participant, you probably got an email saying, hey, we have a new highlight on the data that we have on Fitbit, right? And it was very consumer friendly. And this is one of the examples that we get the researchers to work on it. We do not live alone in the process. We usually work with them as, let's share your presentation. And Daniel was mentioning, it's good to test your presentation with your family and friends, right? So basically our research and adaptation group does that. We have non-scientists within the group, and we review the presentations before they go into the field. And lastly, and I think that this is very important, it's to really tell people that the same way that we collaborate with trusted partners in the community for participants to join the program is to go back through those same trusted channels to be able to do these presentations. So all the presentations were hosted by community-based organizations, which is the safe spaces where our communities go and where they were comfortable inviting a researcher to tell them what's going on with this research. So what happened in these presentations? And the requirement for the researchers was you can develop an infographic, you can develop a 2-pager, very easy to read, or you can go into communities. Not surprisingly, 98% of the researchers that we have say, if you find me a group, I'd be more than happy to go and present. Of course, there are certain barriers. They were too distant from the location of the community-based organization, or the time, our communities, we had to go to them after work hours or on a Saturday. So it was kind of complicated to schedule all of them. But for the ones that we're able to do, we did learn. We have a survey for the participants, for the attendees, asking them, have you learned something? Almost 100% of people walk out of those classrooms saying, I did learn something. Thank you for having us here. Half of them says, like, I have been already participating in health research. We assumed that were all of us participants, but it was very good to know that half of the attendees were already interested in research. And after having a research in the community, close to 90% says, we want to be part of this. We want to continue participating in health research. So for us, that return of value to participants, it is very important. It's something that the people really value. The comments and the questions that came out from the researchers and to the researchers were very specific, in some cases to their personal case, and in some cases is because they saw the benefit for the community. The only recommendation that I will add to the toolkit and what Daniel was saying is we did require the researchers to tell the community the motivation and how the award that they receive and the research that they are doing change them or help them. And some of the comments that we received from researchers, and this is part of the whole storytelling, is most of them were saying, I am focusing on this particular disease because in my family or my friend, or they have that personal connection. And I think that when it comes from the researcher to the community, it speaks very loud of why the importance of participating in health research. The second part was that the benefit, it wasn't just for the researcher. The benefit was for the researcher saying, look, with access to this data and you participating, I have been able to train the new generation of researchers. Probably your kid or your grandkid is right now in college and attending one of my classes. I'm a professor, I do research, and they're helping me in my lab. And they're learning how to do this. And they will be the ones in the future who are probably going to be our doctors and nurses and are going to be taking care of us. So that connection and showing that to the communities has been something that really spoke of the benefit of having the researchers walk out of the lab and come to where the communities are. And I think that that's the effort, and that's what we have learned from them in how important it is to translate to that, to really getting that very specific scientific information in lay terms for our communities to understand why they are doing what they're doing. Lastly, we also asked our participants after the presentations, what other topics would you like to learn about? These are the top 10 that we got from the surveys. Our community, not surprisingly, is all over the place. So everybody wants to know about genetics and genomics in a very easy to understand way. Cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, mental health, Alzheimer's, chronic kidney disease. These are all topics that the community has been saying, next time that you guys are back, next time that you have a researcher coming to our communities, we would like to hear about what's happening and how research is advancing in these particular areas of disease. So I would like to, as always, thank you everybody and the generosity of the participants and the commitment and dedication of the researchers who are looking at all of us data, because without you, this won't be possible. And we are really proud that our communities all are represented in this program, and we're seeing very good results in the research field. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. I love how everyone stayed on time. If all the presenters could please come on camera and we can start our Q&A session. So while we are working that out, just a quick summary. So we heard from the New England team about a toolkit they developed with some resources in developing plain language summaries and things to consider when communicating science to different audiences. And then Daniel shared some best practices in communicating to communities. And then I think Edgar showed a great example of how that was implemented and making it a grant requirement and really connecting researchers to that need directly. My first question to the group is, I think you all are experts in this, so maybe share And all of these tips and best practices are great reminders, but I would love to hear about a time that your materials didn't land as expected with a certain community or population, and what did you learn from that experience? And anyone who wants to go first, the mic is yours.
And Minky, I'm happy to share a story. This is Cheryl. So this was early on in my career, and I think it really reinforced for me the importance of making sure that in many ways, participatory science is a prerequisite to good scientific storytelling. And so making sure that you are working in partnership with the participants in the communities that are most affected by the work that you're doing. Part of what happened in my example is that we were doing an intervention study around cancer prevention. And it was, the results were not exactly what we expected to happen. And there can often be a difference between sort of doing science where, you know, the result may not go the way that you think, and doing advocacy where you really kind of want to promote a story. And so we had to be clear about how to describe the real results, but also to share what potential next steps would be so that there was also hope in the message. So for me, the lessons learned were, one, it's just the participatory piece of this just throughout the entire process is important so that there are no surprises. But also when you are finally summarizing the results, making sure that you're accurate, but that you also pay attention to how people feel about what you're sharing, and that there's hope or other or parts of that would be important to community.
Minky, I can share one of the presentations that we did, and we learned the lesson was that sometimes for the research it's very hard to, and Daniel mentioned this, using acronyms and using terminology when they get into the topic, right? Because they are the experts on that, and it's out of practice. You are not, usually you're presenting to a scientific audience, so you are already in one mindset. So a lot of the work has been, and through the process that we have been learning, is how to really go back to the researchers with feedback and saying, hey, let's work on this, because when you're presenting the community, you lost half of the audience at some point, right? Like it's one of those issues. And the second one for us has been language. A lot of the outreach that we did was for participants who sign up into the program in Spanish. That's the language that they prefer. And having somebody from the research team who is fully bilingual. Some of them have knowledge of the language, but to the level of being able to feel comfortable presenting to communities kind of like made them nervous. So having the capacity to have translation services during the presentation, that has been very helpful. So the community can ask the questions that they want to ask without being nervous. Because the community also feel like, I want to ask my question, but I don't know if the research is going to understand what I'm asking. So that has been part of the process of learning how to make things work better.
That's great. And that's a good reminder just that representation matters too. So in the images and the panelists, just seeing familiar people always helps to make that connection. And Daniel, did you have a lesson learned? And I do have a specific question for you from the audience too.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, I think a lesson that we have learned and continue to learn is knowing, kind of meeting the community where they're at when you do the presentation. So we've done presentations where it's been focused on the research findings, but actually what the community wants to speak about first is data privacy and security. And before they can actually start to grapple with the findings, they're like, we need to answer these questions and make sure we understand how was it that participants were enrolled? How was it that, you know, this research was conducted? How is the data being made safe? And it's really great that all of us has a robust set of materials to speak about these issues and these topics. And organizations like myself that, you know, are part of the consortium are well equipped to be able to speak to that. So I think While you might go in with a particular, agenda or presentation, that you really need to be responsive to the community, because if you're presenting to the community and you don't listen to where the questions are, and if we just, actually back to the slide deck, or, kind of breezed over it, it doesn't do anything to build trust, and it doesn't help with that engagement in terms of that longer term goal around the findings helping the community.
Yes, that's so true. And we see that with every participant convening that we've been hosting. I think we saw it during the opening session today too. And it's not easy to tailor to each audience because everyone is so different. So for you, Daniel, we did get from the audience, so have you measured the impact of your strategies on the communities you approach, and how do you know they're effective?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it's a really important question with everything that we do, right? To look at evaluation, what's effective. So I'll talk about what we've done a lot with our community engagement strategies that aren't presented here, but I'm going to focus on what we've been talking about in terms of our research communications and community-friendly summaries. So with our convenings, and in particular, like webinars to share findings back or events to share findings back, we always have post surveys that attendees complete. And some of the metrics that we're exploring was this, providing value for the attendee? Did they learn something new about either the All of Us research program or about this particular area of research? Is this something that they're going to be sharing with their family or friends? So, and we have found very high marks across the board on all of the metrics in terms of increase of awareness, of understanding, and I think really important about it was meaningful, it was valuable for the attendee. It is raising a good question. We haven't necessarily done formal evaluation for our infographics and for the community-friendly summaries. We have gotten more anecdotal feedback that actually some people say they bring community-friendly summaries into their health provider appointments. And so when they're talking about their health, they're like, hey, I found this and here's the summary. So we've heard kind of anecdotally the real world kind of applications. And we've done, kind of testing with groups about the effectiveness. But you're raising a good point, and maybe this is something that we'll start to work on after this presentation because of your great question. Maybe there's a way we can more quantitatively look at the impact for written community-friendly summaries and infographics. Thank you for that question.
Thanks. Thank you for that answer. And I know for our events, we ask similar questions like, did you learn something new from today's event? And then, what are some follow-up action items that you might take? And if it's, taking something back to their healthcare provider, it's always great to hear things like that on how they're actually using the things that they learned on webinars and other events. So I think those could also be great metrics if you put them into some sort of quantitative survey. So, and then we have another question from the audience, and I think this could apply to all of the presenters today. Many of the graphics showed in the slide deck had a lot of text on them. What do you do to make them usable for social media so that the text doesn't kill the algorithm, but you still convey the information?
And Miki, I'm happy to also just share just a tidbit, and I'll be brief, maybe 140 characters in my response. It's just that you really have to pull out the key point, right? It's I think it's okay also to have a conversation, for example, on social media where you have one post that has one set of comments and you follow it up or have a story. There are other platforms that are helpful for that sort of thing too, where you can have a reel or a series. But I think it's a good reminder that we have to fit our points to the platforms that we're using. And often it is important to just focus in on the key message and use few words. That was more than 140 characters, but I think I get the point.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, sorry. I can just echo. I think, you know, what we're going to be trying to test out is kind of like carousels of images. So rather than, and so some platforms allow for that more than others. So if there is a lot that you're trying to convey, trying to break it up into multiple images. But yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you all. And then I know Colin is back with us and he had some technical issues earlier and we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask Colin to share any final thoughts with us and any best practices that he wanted to share with us earlier during his presentation.
Thank you for bearing with me through the technical difficulties and giving me the opportunity to share some of my the best practices that we found at New England. We have done a lot of work to personalize the research process and the researchers at New England. We've done podcasts, newsletters, and participant convenings. And the participant convenings and podcasts specifically allow for researchers to seem more than just like a scientist, actually like a person. And it also allows the participants to start to understand how their data is being used and how they are actually contributing to the findings that we're getting. It also allows a narrative structure, which helps them digest and understand the information. So podcasts and the convenings provide great ways for participants to, get acquainted with the research and what the researchers are doing. And we've also been using newsletters. And those are great for detailed information. The things that you might miss in a social media post, you can grab in a newsletter. They allow for a real breakdown of that. Importantly, everything needs to be done at a 6th grade reading level for the easiest processing of the information, and ideally multilingually, so that the broadest group of people can understand it if we're really trying to give back to the community as researchers.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you were able to join back with us. So this was a great session. And, our participant convenings, Colin, going back to what you just mentioned, have been really successful. We've had great experiences with the researchers that have been presenting there, as well as our participant partners who've been joining. So I do want to kind of flag that as a future event. To the researchers in today's workshop, if you'd like to practice the skills that you just learned about today, the program does offer several opportunities like the participant convenings and other webinars. So if you are interested in volunteering to present your research at a future event and practice the skills that we just learned about, please email aou_visibility@nih.gov, and we'll put that in the chat, and include a link to your project in the research projects directory on the researcher workbench, along with your bio. And when an opportunity comes up, one of our team members will get back to you. That pretty much wraps up our session. We have one more concurrent scientific session left, 7A on understanding heart health, diabetes, and other long-term conditions, and session 7B, how researchers are using data and technology to drive better health. And you can navigate to these sessions using the agenda page, which you can find at the top of your screen. Many thanks to each of our panelists for presenting today. One of my favorite groups. Thank you all for attending today to learn more about making research more accessible to all. It's one of our very core values of the program, so we're happy to support this. And I hope you're enjoying Science Day. I look forward to seeing you all online on the next session. Thank you all.